Captain Zilith's long fingers trembled as they moved across the control panel of the merchant ship Serenity's Echo. The Velkin's pale blue skin had turned almost white with fear. Outside the viewing port, 3 massive raider ships closed in like hungry predators circling wounded prey. "Captain, they're charging weapons again," said Navigator Prex from his station. His voice shook despite his efforts to stay calm. The Velkins were not built for violence. Their homeworld of Velka Prime was a peaceful place with low gravity and gentle winds. They had evolved from creatures that floated through crystal forests, feeding on light and minerals. War was something they read about in history books, not something they lived through. The first blast hit their shields. The ship shuddered and groaned. Zilith could hear the metal plates straining under the impact. Emergency lights flashed red across the bridge. The smell of burning circuits filled the air. "Shields down to 60%, reported Engineer Vex. Her delicate hands moved quickly over her controls, trying to reroute power. But the Serenity's Echo was a trade ship, not a warship. It carried art, music crystals, and rare fabrics between the outer colonies. It had basic shields and no weapons worth mentioning. The raiders were Kreks, a brutal species known for attacking merchant vessels. They looked like walking nightmares with their dark scales, sharp teeth, and red eyes that glowed in the dark. They took what they wanted and left nothing behind but empty ships floating in space. "Send another distress call," Zilith ordered. "All frequencies. Someone has to help us." Prex's fingers danced over the communication controls. "Broadcasting on all channels, Captain. Emergency protocols active." The second blast was stronger. It punched through their failing shields and hit the hull directly. The ship spun sideways from the impact. Zilith gripped his chair as artificial gravity struggled to compensate. Sparks flew from damaged systems. One of the crew members cried out in pain. "Hull breach in Section 7, Vex reported. "Sealing emergency barriers now." Zilith watched the tactical display with growing horror. The Krek ships were bigger and better armed. They moved with the confidence of hunters who had done this many times before. The Serenity's Echo was helpless against them. The first response to their distress call came from the Thraxian Defense Force. "Merchant vessel, this is Admiral Korex of the TDF. We have received your transmission. We are currently reviewing proper procedures for intervention in non-Thraxian space. Please stand by." "Review procedures?" Prex whispered in disbelief. "We'll be dead before they finish their paperwork." The next response came from the Nexari Collective. Their message was brief and unhelpful. "The Collective is currently in seasonal hibernation. Your request will be processed when the cycle completes in 47 standard days." 47 days, Vex said bitterly. "They might as well send flowers to our memorial service." A third message arrived from the proud Zentaran Empire. "Unknown vessel, the Empire does not involve itself in the affairs of lesser species. Solve your own problems." Zilith felt hope dying in his chest. This was how it would end. The great galactic civilization that promised peace and cooperation would watch them die because of paperwork, sleep cycles, and pride. The third Krek's blast tore through their engine section. The ship lost power and began to drift. Emergency lighting flickered on and off. The smell of coolant leaked into the air, making it hard to breathe. "Main engines offline," Vex reported. "Life support failing. We have maybe an hour before the air runs out." Through the static-filled communication system, they could hear the Krek ships talking to each other in their harsh language. They sounded excited, happy. They enjoyed this part where their prey stopped running and started dying. Then something impossible happened. A new voice cut through the communications chatter. It was rough and gravelly, speaking in accented galactic standard. "Unknown merchant vessel. This is the cargo hauler Dirt Devil. We copy your distress call. What's your situation?" Prex looked at Zilith with confusion. "Sir, I'm not familiar with that ship designation." "And the accent? Just answer them," Zilith said. Hope flickered in his chest like a small flame. "This is Captain Zilith of the Serenity's Echo. We're under attack by 3 Kreks raider ships. Our shields are down and engines are failing. Can you help us?" There was a pause. Then the voice came back, sounding almost amused. "Kreks raiders, huh? Yeah, we can help with that. What's your exact location?" Prex quickly transmitted their coordinates. "Sir, who are these people? I've never heard of the Dirt Devil in any shipping registry." Before Zilith could answer, the voice returned. "Copy that, Echo. We're about 20 minutes out. Try to keep breathing until we get there." "Wait," Zilith said quickly. "Who are you?" "What species?" What kind of weapons do you have? Another pause. Then something that sounded like laughter. We're human, Captain. From Earth, and don't worry about our weapons. Just worry about staying alive for 20 more minutes. The communication ended. Zilith stared at the display in shock. Humans, he had heard rumors about humans. They came from somewhere called Earth, which was listed in the galactic database as a Class 12 death world. He had always assumed that was some kind of mistake in the records. Captain, Vex said quietly, the database says Class 12 worlds are uninhabitable. Extreme gravity, toxic atmosphere, constant natural disasters. Nothing could evolve there except what? Prex asked. Vex's voice was barely a whisper. Except monsters. Another Krex blast shook their dying ship. But now Zilith felt something he had not felt before. Not hope exactly, but curiosity. What kind of beings answered distress calls that everyone else ignored? What kind of creatures came from worlds so dangerous that the galaxy classified them as death worlds? 15 minutes until hull breach in Section 12, Vex reported. Atmospheric pressure dropping. Zilith nodded and settled back in his chair. Either they would be saved by mysterious humans from an impossible world, or they would die knowing that someone had at least tried to help. Either way, it was better than being ignored by the civilized galaxy. Outside, the Krex ships moved closer for the killing blow. They had no idea that something was coming for them from the darkness between the stars. Something that had learned to fight on a world where everything wanted to kill everything else. Something human. The Serenity's echo drifted through space, bleeding air and power. Its crew waited in the emergency lighting, counting down the minutes until either rescue or death. In the distance, stars twinkled peacefully, unaware that the balance of power in this small corner of the galaxy was about to shift forever. 20 minutes had never seemed so long. The human ship dropped out of hyperspace with none of the smooth grace that Zilith expected from starfaring vessels. Instead of the gentle shimmer of properly tuned engines, space seemed to tear open like fabric. The Dirt Devil tumbled through the hole in reality, spinning twice before its pilot got control. Zilith stared at the newcomer through his failing sensors. The ship looked nothing like any vessel in the galactic registry. Where most ships were sleek and beautiful, this one was covered in scars. Burn marks from asteroid impacts streaked across its hull. Welded patches covered holes that should have been repaired in proper shipyards. One entire section looked like it had been rebuilt using parts from 3 different ships. Captain, Prex said in a shocked whisper, that ship shouldn't be able to fly. Look at those engine modifications. And those weapon mounts. Are those mining lasers? Before Zilith could answer, the Dirt Devil opened a communication channel. The same rough voice they had heard before filled their bridge. Okay, Echo, we're here. You folks just sit tight while we sort this out. Wait, Zilith said quickly. You need to know what you're facing. 3 heavy raiders with military-grade weapons. They've been attacking ships in this sector for months. Maybe you should call for backup. Laughter came through the speakers. Actual laughter. Backup from who? The Thrax bureaucrats? The sleeping Nexari? Don't worry about us, Captain. We've dealt with worse things before breakfast. Zilith watched in amazement as the human ship moved toward the Krex raiders. It didn't use any of the standard attack patterns taught in galactic military academies. Instead, it flew like something alive and angry. The pilot threw the ship into turns that should have torn it apart. It twisted and rolled through space like a predator playing with its prey. The Krex ships immediately turned their attention to this new threat. They had been expecting another helpless merchant vessel, not this scarred monster that moved like it enjoyed fighting. Their formation scattered as they tried to get a clear shot. Unknown vessel, came a harsh Krex voice over the communications. You are interfering with a legal salvage operation. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. The human response was immediate and cheerful. Legal salvage? That's funny. Hey Sarah, did you hear that? They think shooting up merchant ships is legal. A new voice answered, female and cold as space. I heard, Doc. Should we explain galactic law to them? Nah, the first voice replied. I think they're about to get a practical demonstration. Zilith realized there were multiple humans on that ship. The idea terrified him more than the Krex raiders. One human was frightening enough. A whole crew of them seemed impossible. The Dirt Devil suddenly accelerated straight toward the largest Krex ship. Zilith gasped as he realized the human pilot was playing chicken with a ship 3 times their size. At the last second, the human ship rolled aside and fired. But instead of standard energy weapons, Streams of superheated plasma erupted from the mining lasers. The beams cut through the Krek ship's shields like they weren't there. Metal boiled away under the assault. The Raider ship's hull glowed red-hot where the lasers touched it. Impossible, Vex breathed. Those are industrial tools, not weapons. How are they cutting through military shields? A third human voice answered as if he had heard her question. This one spoke with a thick accent. Is simple physics, little blue friend. We route all power from life support and artificial gravity into laser array. Very dangerous for us, but Krek's ship, she does not like being cut in half. They shut off their life support, Prex said in horror. How are they breathing? Emergency suits, the human called Boris replied calmly. We wear them always when fighting. On Earth, we learn young that safety equipment keeps you alive. Zelith watched the battle unfold with growing amazement. The humans didn't fight like any civilized species. They used their cargo bay as a weapons platform, launching mining charges like missiles. They rerouted power in ways that should have killed them. They flew their ship into positions that exposed them to enemy fire, but gave them better shots at weak points. The Kreks were brutal fighters, but they followed standard Raider tactics. They expected their enemies to be afraid. They expected their victims to make predictable moves based on fear and desperation. The humans were not afraid. They were having fun. Sarah, came the doctor's voice again. The middle ship has weaker rear shielding. If we come up from below? I see it, the pilot replied. Boris, can you give me 30 seconds of full power? 30 seconds. But then we drift for 2 minutes while reactor cools. 30 seconds is plenty. Zelith watched the human ship dive beneath the Krek's formation. The Raiders tried to follow, but the Dirt Devil moved like it was alive. It spun and twisted through their weapons fire, taking hits that would have destroyed most ships but somehow staying in one piece. When it emerged behind the second Krek ship, all its weapons fired at once. The mining lasers, the improvised missiles, even what looked like a salvage claw that grabbed onto the Raider's engine section. Sparks flew as the claw tore away armor plating. The Krek ship tried to shake free, but the humans held on. Through his sensors, Zelith could see figures moving in the human cargo bay. They wore bulky suits that looked like armor from ancient wars. One of them was doing something to what appeared to be an industrial cutting torch. Are they going to board that ship? Prex asked in disbelief. Looks like it, came the human doctor's voice. Don't worry, folks. Sarah knows what she's doing, probably. The human called Sarah laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Definitely know what I'm doing. Question is whether these Kreks remember what happens when you corner something that bites back. The cargo bay doors opened. 3 figures in powered armor launched themselves across the gap between ships. They moved through space like they had done this 100 times before. When they reached the Krek's hull, one of them began cutting through the armor with a torch that burned brighter than a star. That's impossible, Vex whispered. No one does boarding actions anymore. It's too dangerous. Tell that to the humans, Zelith replied. The third Krek ship tried to help its companion, but the Dirt Devil was already moving again. It positioned itself between the Raiders, using the boarded ship as cover. The Kreks couldn't fire without hitting their own vessel. Through the chaos, Zelith heard the humans talking to each other with calm professionalism. They coordinated their attacks like they had been working together for years. But underneath their casual chatter, he could hear something else, something that made his blood run cold. They were enjoying this. These creatures from a death world didn't just fight because they had to. They fought because some part of them wanted to. They had evolved on a planet so dangerous that violence had become natural to them. They were predators wearing the mask of civilization, and right now they were the most beautiful sight Zelith had ever seen. The boarding party was inside the Krek's ship. Explosions flashed through the Raiders' windows. Emergency lights flickered on and off. Within minutes, the ship went dark and began to drift. Krek's vessel neutralized, Sarah reported. Boris, you ready for round 3? Always ready, Captain, is what we do. The remaining Krek ship turned and ran. Zelith could hardly believe what he was seeing. The Raiders who had been hunting his ship like wolves suddenly fled like frightened children. Their powerful vessel, which moments ago had seemed unstoppable, accelerated away from the battle as fast as its engines could push it. Should we let them go? Asked the human called Sarah. Negative, came the doctor's voice, now cold and clinical. If we let them escape, they'll just attack someone else tomorrow. Someone who might not have backup coming. Good point, Doc. Boris, how much power do we have left? Enough for one more fight, maybe 2 if they are stupid. Zilith watched in fascination as the human ship gave chase. The Dirt Devil should have been slower than the sleek Krex Raider, but somehow it kept pace. The human pilot flew in ways that defied physics, using gravitational fields from nearby asteroids to boost their speed. "How are they doing that?" Engineer Vex asked in amazement. "That maneuver should tear their ship apart." "Human engineering," Boris's voice answered through their open communication channel. "We build ships like we build everything else, strong enough to survive what kills other things." The chase led through an asteroid field. Most pilots would have slowed down to navigate the dangerous rocks safely. The humans accelerated. They flew their battered ship through gaps barely wider than their hull, using asteroids as shields when the Krex ship fired back at them. "This is insane," Krex whispered. "They're going to get themselves killed." "Duh," Boris agreed cheerfully. "Is possible, but Krex ship she will die first. Is guarantee." Zilith realized that the humans weren't just chasing their enemy. They were hurting them. Every time the Krex ship tried to change course, the Dirt Devil would fire a mining charge or laser blast to drive them in a different direction. Slowly, methodically, they were forcing the Raider toward a cluster of larger asteroids. "Sarah," the doctor said, "if we can get them into that rocky area, their long-range sensors won't work as well." "Already on it, Doc. These Krex idiots don't realize they're being driven into a trap." The human tactics were unlike anything Zilith had studied in galactic military history. Civilized warfare involved careful positioning, proper formations, and honorable engagements between equally matched forces. This was something else entirely. This was hunting. The Krex ship entered the asteroid cluster and immediately began having problems. The rocks interfered with their sensors and communications. They slowed down, trying to navigate safely through the dangerous terrain. That was exactly what the humans had been waiting for. The Dirt Devil came up from beneath the asteroid field, hidden by the sensor shadows of the larger rocks. When it emerged, it was close enough that the Krex couldn't miss and too close for the Raiders to escape. But instead of firing immediately, the humans opened a communication channel. "Krex vessel," the doctor's voice said calmly. "This is Dr. Yuki Tanaka of the Earth vessel Dirt Devil. I want you to know that I've studied your species extensively. I know exactly where your vital organs are located. I know which parts of your body are most sensitive to pain. I know how long you can survive in vacuum." There was silence from the Krex ship. "Now," Dr. Tanaka continued in the same calm tone, "you have 30 seconds to surrender your vessel and prepare to be taken prisoner. If you refuse, I will demonstrate my anatomical knowledge in ways you will find extremely educational." Zilith felt his blood turn to ice. The human doctor sounded like she was discussing the weather, not threatening to torture their enemies. But there was something in her voice that made it clear she wasn't bluffing. "You're bluffing," came a shaky Krex voice. "The Galactic Peace Accords forbid torture." "The Galactic Peace Accords," Dr. Tanaka replied sweetly, "were written by species that never had to fight for survival every day of their evolutionary history. I'm from Earth. We have different rules." A new sound came through the communication system. It took Zilith a moment to realize what it was. The human called Sarah was sharpening something. The metallic scraping sound echoed through space like a promise of violence. 20 seconds, Dr. Tanaka announced. "Wait," the Krex captain shouted. "We surrender. We surrender." "Smart choice," Sarah said. "Boris, lock onto their ship with the tractor beam. Doc, scan them for weapons." As Zilith watched, the humans efficiently disabled and captured the remaining Krex vessel. They worked with the kind of smooth coordination that only came from years of practice. These people had done this before. Many times. Serenity's echo, came Sarah's voice. "This is Dirt Devil. Area is secure. How are you holding up over there?" "We're alive," Zilith managed to say. "Barely. Our life support systems are failing. Copy that. We're coming alongside to help with repairs. Fair warning, though. We're about to dock with your ship. Try not to be alarmed by what you see." "What do you mean?" Krex asked. "Well," Sarah said, and Zilith could hear amusement in her voice. "We're human. Most species find us a bit intense the first time they see us." Through the viewing port, Zilith watched the human ship approach. Up close, it looked even more impossible. The hull was covered with patches made from different types of metal. Weapon mounts had been welded onto what were obviously civilian systems. The whole ship looked like it had been built by someone who cared more about function than beauty. It was the most beautiful thing Zilith had ever seen. The docking tube connected with a solid thunk. Warning lights flashed as the airlock cycled. Xylith and his crew gathered near the entrance to their ship, unsure of what to expect. The airlock opened. The first human through was clearly the captain. She was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a patched environmental suit that looked like it had survived several wars. Her skin was darker than Xylith's, and her hair was pulled back in a practical style. But it was her eyes that captured his attention. They were alert and dangerous, constantly scanning for threats. Behind her came a smaller human with neat black hair and precise movements. This had to be Dr. Tanaka. She carried a medical kit in one hand and something that looked like a weapon in the other. Her smile was polite but somehow predatory. The third human was massive. Boris had to duck to fit through the doorway. His arms were bigger than Xylith's entire torso, and his hands looked like they could crush metal. Scars covered his visible skin, and his beard was streaked with gray. "Hello," Captain Sarah said in perfectly polite galactic standard. "I'm Captain Rodriguez. Thanks for waiting for us." Xylith stared at them in shock. These were the monsters from the Deathworld? They looked almost normal if you ignored the obvious muscle mass and the way they moved like coiled springs ready to explode into violence. "You're human," he said stupidly. "Last time we checked," Dr. Tanaka replied with that disturbing smile. "Now let's take a look at your ship." Boris checked their engines. "I'll handle life support." "Captain, maybe you could help our Velkan friends understand what just happened." As the humans spread out through his ship, Xylith realized something important. These people had risked their lives for complete strangers. They had fought 3 ships with superior firepower and won. They had saved his crew when no one else would even try. And now they were fixing his ship like it was the most natural thing in the world. Boris worked on the Serenity's Echo's engines with tools that looked like they belonged in a museum. He used a hammer to fix delicate electronics. He welded broken connections with equipment that sparked and smoked. Xylith watched in horror as the massive human treated his ship's sophisticated systems like farm equipment. "Is not so bad," Boris said, noticing Xylith's expression. "Your engine, she is just frightened. We give her little encouragement, she will work again." "Encouragement?" Engineer Vex asked nervously. Boris grinned, showing teeth that looked too white and too sharp. "On Earth, we say percussive maintenance. Sometimes machines just need good kick to remember how to work." As if to prove his point, he hit something with a large wrench. Sparks flew, and then the engine hummed back to life. Vex stared at the readings on her display in disbelief. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Those connections were completely severed." "We're not severed," Boris corrected. "We're just confused. Now they remember their job." Meanwhile, Dr. Tanaka had somehow restored their life support systems using spare parts that looked like they came from 3 different ship types. She worked with precise movements, her hands steady despite the cramped conditions. When she finished, the air in the ship smelled clean for the first time in hours. "How did you do that?" Prex asked in amazement. "Human ingenuity," she replied. "When you grow up on a world where everything tries to kill you, you learn to fix things with whatever you have available. We call it making do." Captain Rodriguez had spent her time reviewing the Krek ships they had captured. She moved through the Serenity's Echo like she owned it, checking their tactical systems and examining their cargo manifest. Xylith found her presence both reassuring and terrifying. "Captain Xylith," she said, calling him over to the main display. "We need to talk about these raiders." "What about them?" "They've been hitting ships in this sector for months, and they're not just random pirates. Look at this." She brought up tactical data from the captured Krek's vessels. The information showed attack patterns, shipping schedules, and detailed intelligence about merchant routes. "Someone's been feeding them information," Rodriguez continued. "They know which ships carry valuable cargo and which ones have minimal defenses. This was an organized operation." Xylith felt sick. "You're saying someone in the legitimate shipping community is working with the raiders?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. And until we figure out who, more merchants are going to die. But what can we do? We're just traders." Rodriguez smiled, and Xylith suddenly understood why the Kreks had surrendered so quickly. There was something predatory in that expression, something that spoke of violence barely held in check. "You're going to help us set a trap," she said. An hour later, the Serenity's Echo was broadcasting on all commercial frequencies. Captain Xylith, following a script that Dr. Tanaka had written, reported that his ship had been damaged by pirates but had managed to escape. He claimed they were carrying a particularly valuable cargo of rare crystals and would need to stop at the nearest trading station for repairs. "This feels wrong," Prex muttered. "We're using ourselves as bait." "Is good plan," Boris said from where he was installing something that looked suspiciously like a weapon into their communications array. "We let bad guys come to us instead of hunting them down. Is efficient. But what if more raiders show up than you can handle?" Vex asked. Captain Rodriguez laughed from the pilot's seat. She had taken over flying duties while Zelith's regular pilot recovered from injuries. "Lady, we're from Earth. We've been outnumbered since the day we were born. It just makes things more interesting." The trap worked perfectly. Within 6 hours, 2 more Krek ships had appeared on their sensors. But this time, the humans were ready for them. The Dirt Devil had been hiding in the sensor shadow of a nearby asteroid. When the raiders moved to attack the apparently helpless Serenity's Echo, the human ship emerged like a predator striking from ambush. But these Kreks had learned from the destruction of their fellow raiders. They came in shooting, trying to disable the human ship before it could fight back. Energy beams lanced through space, forcing the Dirt Devil to roll and dodge. "Sarah!" Dr. Tanaka called out. "Their weapons are more powerful than the first group. Military grade, not just pirate gear." "I see it," Rodriguez replied grimly. "These aren't random raiders. Someone's been arming them." The battle was different from the first encounter. These Kreks fought like professionals, using coordinated attacks and covering each other's movements. The humans were forced to work harder for their victory, but work harder they did. Boris somehow managed to overload their mining lasers, creating beams of energy that could cut through anything. Dr. Tanaka launched a barrage of improvised missiles that confused the Krek's targeting systems. And Captain Rodriguez flew their ship like a dancer, spinning through the enemy fire with grace that made no sense given the laws of physics. "How is she doing that?" Vex asked, watching the tactical display in amazement. "That maneuver should have torn your ship apart." "Human pilots," Boris explained proudly. "We do not worry about what should be possible. We worry about what needs to be done." The turning point came when one of the Krek ships tried to ram the Dirt Devil. It was a desperate move, the kind of thing that happened when skilled fighters realized they were losing to someone better. Instead of dodging, Rodriguez accelerated toward the enemy ship. The 2 vessels rushed toward each other like ancient knights charging with lances. At the last second, the human ship rolled aside and fired every weapon they had into the Krek's engine section. The raider ship exploded in a ball of superheated plasma. The shockwave sent both remaining vessels tumbling through space. "Status report," Rodriguez called out. "Minor hull damage," Boris reported. "Nothing we cannot fix with some tape and creative welding." "Tape?" Prex asked weakly. "Is very good tape," Boris assured him. "Earth military grade. We'll hold until we reach proper shipyard." The surviving Krek's ship tried to escape, but Dr. Tanaka had already locked onto them with some kind of tractor beam. As they were pulled inexorably back toward the human vessel, Zelith could hear panicked communications from the raider crew. "They're trying to surrender," he told Rodriguez. "Too late for that," she replied coldly. "These ones shot first and asked questions later. They made their choice. What happened next would stay with Zelith for the rest of his life. The humans didn't just defeat their enemies, they dismantled them with surgical precision. They disabled weapons, cut through armor, and systematically stripped away every system that made the Krek ship dangerous. When they were finished, the raider vessel was nothing more than a helpless hull floating in space. Its crew was alive, but completely at the mercy of the humans who had destroyed their ship with casual efficiency. "This is what happens," Captain Rodriguez announced over the open communication channel. "When you prey on innocent merchants, spread the word to your friends. This sector is under human protection now." She turned to Zelith with that dangerous smile. "Captain, I think your cargo route just became a lot safer." As Zelith looked around his repaired ship, at the human engineers who had fixed the impossible, and the human warriors who had fought the unbeatable, he realized something important. The galaxy had just changed. These humans weren't just another species looking for trade opportunities and peaceful coexistence. They were something new, something the civilized galaxy had never seen before. They were protectors who protected by being more dangerous than the things they fought. The 2 ships traveled together toward the nearest trading station, the Serenity's Echo escorted by the scarred and deadly Dirt Devil. During the 3-day journey, Zelith found himself spending more and more time talking with the humans. "What?" He learned changed everything he thought he knew about the galaxy. Dr. Tanaka was the most willing to answer questions. She sat in the Echo's common area, sharing something she called coffee with the Velkin crew. The drink smelled awful and looked like liquid poison, but the humans seemed to love it. "Tell me about Earth," Zelith requested. "The database says it's a Class 12 death world, but that seems impossible. How can anything evolve on such a planet?" Dr. Tanaka smiled, but this time it seemed genuinely friendly rather than predatory. "Earth isn't impossible, Captain. It's just difficult. Most worlds in the galaxy developed life under stable conditions. Gentle weather, predictable seasons, few natural disasters. Earth was different." She activated a holographic display showing a blue and green planet covered in swirling white clouds. It looked beautiful and peaceful. "Looks nice," Engineer Vex commented. "That's the trap," Dr. Tanaka replied. "Earth looks peaceful from space. But get closer, and you'll find storms that can level entire cities, earthquakes that split continents, volcanoes that can change the planet's climate, ice ages that last for thousands of years." The display changed to show massive hurricanes, exploding volcanoes, and walls of ice covering huge land masses. "But that's just the geology," she continued. "The real challenge was the other life forms. New images appeared. Creatures with massive teeth and claws, predators that hunted in coordinated packs, tiny organisms that could kill with poison or disease. Everything on Earth was trying to eat everything else, Dr. Tanaka explained. Plants developed toxins to avoid being eaten. Animals developed armor, speed, or weapons to survive. And then there were the parasites, the diseases, the fungi that could take over your nervous system. Navigator Prex looked sick. How did anything survive? By becoming tougher, Dr. Tanaka said simply. The weak died, the strong survived, and had children who were even stronger. For millions of years, Earth was a testing ground that only allowed the most adaptable species to live. And humans were one of those species? Zelith asked. We were the ultimate product of that process. We couldn't run as fast as some animals, couldn't fight as well as others. But we could think, we could plan, we could work together, and most importantly, we could adapt to anything. Boris joined them, carrying his own cup of the terrible coffee. Is true, he agreed. Human ancestors, they lived through ice ages, volcanic winters, plagues that kill 90% of population. Each time, survivors get little bit stronger, little bit smarter, little bit more stubborn. Stubborn? Prex asked. Duh, Boris grinned. Is most important human trait. When Galaxy says something is impossible, humans say, hold my beer and watch this. What's beer? Vex inquired. Is another earth poison we drink for fun, Boris explained cheerfully. Makes you brave and stupid at same time. Very useful for impossible tasks. Captain Rodriguez entered the common area, moving with that fluid grace that made her seem dangerous even when she was relaxed. She poured herself coffee and settled into a chair that looked too small for her frame. You're scaring them, Doc, she said with amusement. They probably think we're monsters. Are you? Zelith asked quietly. Rodriguez considered the question seriously. Depends on your definition of monster, Captain. We're predators, that's true. We evolved to hunt and fight and survive things that would kill most species. But we're also protectors. We form packs, families, tribes, nations, and we'll die before we let our pack members get hurt. But we're not your pack, Prex pointed out. We're complete strangers. Why did you risk your lives for us? Because, Rodriguez said simply, that's what humans do. When we see someone in trouble, we help. It's built into who we are. Our ancestors survived because they worked together, helped each other, protected the weak. It's instinct, Dr. Tanaka nodded. Every human culture in history has stories about heroes who risk everything to save strangers. It's not just noble behavior. It's literally how we're programmed to think. Besides, Boris added with a laugh, was fun fight. Krex raiders, they think they are so tough. But they never fight something that fights back properly. Was good to show them what real predators can do. Zeleth realized something that made his blood run cold. "You enjoyed the battle." "Of course we did," Rodriguez replied without shame. "We're human. Violence is part of our nature. The difference is that we choose when and why to be violent. We don't hurt innocent people. We hurt the people who hurt innocent people." "The galaxy needs that," Dr. Tanaka said seriously. "All these civilized species with their rules and protocols. They're soft. They've forgotten that sometimes the only way to stop evil is to be more dangerous than evil is." Over the next 2 days, Zeleth learned more about humanity than he had ever wanted to know. They were indeed monsters, but they were monsters who had chosen to be heroes. They carried weapons of incredible destructive power, but used them only to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. They told stories of their homeworld that sounded like nightmares. Predators that could track prey across continents. Weather systems that could destroy entire civilizations. Diseases that killed billions. But they also told stories of humans who faced these horrors and refused to give up. "Is why other species fear us," Boris explained. "They look at humans and see creatures that survived hell itself. They think we must be devils." "But we're not devils," Rodriguez added. "We're just people who learned that sometimes you have to become the thing that monsters fear." When they finally reached the trading station, word of their adventure had somehow spread ahead of them. Ships from a dozen different species waited to meet the humans who had single-handedly cleared out the raider problem that had been plaguing the sector for months. As they docked, Zeleth felt sad to see the humans go. They had become friends during the journey, despite the fact that they represented everything the civilized galaxy feared. "What will you do now?" he asked Captain Rodriguez. "Same thing we always do," she replied. "Look for people who need help. Fight the things that need fighting. Try to make the galaxy a little bit safer for folks like you." "Will we see you again?" Rodriguez smiled that dangerous smile. "Captain, I have a feeling that humans and the merchant guilds are going to be working together a lot more in the future. Word's going to spread that there are people out here who will actually show up when you call for help." As the humans prepared to leave, Dr. Tanaka handed Zeleth a small device. "What is this?" he asked. "Emergency transmitter," she explained. "Human design. If you're ever in trouble again, activate it. Every human ship within 50 light years will hear the signal." "And they'll come?" "They'll come," she confirmed. "That's what humans do. We answer the call." As the Dirt Devil undocked and disappeared into hyperspace, Zeleth stood at the viewing port and thought about what he had learned. The galaxy was full of civilized species who talked about peace and cooperation, but abandoned you when things got dangerous. But now there were humans. Monsters from a death world who had learned to use their monstrous nature to protect the innocent. Predators who had chosen to hunt other predators instead of prey. Within hours of the humans' departure, Zeleth received communication requests from merchant captains across the sector. They all wanted to know the same thing. How could they contact these mysterious humans who actually fought back? Zeleth smiled as he prepared his responses. The galaxy was about to discover that it had new protectors. Protectors who might scare you worse than your enemies. But who would show up when no one else would? Protectors who came from Earth, where everything was dangerous and everyone had learned to be dangerous right back. The age of human protection had begun, and pirates across the galaxy were about to learn a very important lesson. When you prey on the innocent, eventually something bigger and meaner comes looking for you, and sometimes that something is human.